behind the curtain.
Yeah,
The narcissist is defending the curtain. It's the curtain that the narcissist is defending.
exactly what I always say.
And
Exactly.
he's terrified that you will pull away the curtain. He's not terrified that you will take away his money or you will put him in prison. Or yes, of course, that's unpleasant. But his terror is that it will become known who he truly is.
This is such a great conversation. Professor Sam Vaknin, I feel like I know you because I've listened to you so much. You're one of the most intelligent people on this subject that I listen to. And it is such a pleasure for me to actually get to speak with you. So thank you for agreeing to have this conversation with me.
Thank you for having me. I don't know if I'm one of the most intelligent, but I definitely pioneered the field. I started my work in the late 80s and early 90s when there was nobody online. I was alone for 10 years, 9 years actually, all alone. The only website and the only support groups for victims of narcissists were mine. I owned them and moderated them and so on. And so for 9 years, I've been a voice in the desert. And later on, there was an avalanche of, people joining in, and many of them never heard of me even, but they are my intellectual descendants, so to speak.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I feel like I'm pioneering the area of negotiating with narcissists
Mhm.
in the legal sense. I know when I started on YouTube 4 years ago, talking about how to negotiate with narcissists as a lawyer, I was definitely the only one. And then it started that people were reaching out to me, oh, do you know any lawyers that are specializing in how to
Yeah.
negotiate with narcissists? And I'm like, I'm the only one that's doing this. So there's no such thing as lawyers that are specializing in how to negotiate
Right. Yeah, that's
narcissists.
true. That's very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lawyers, even therapists. There were no therapists specializing in narcissistic abuse or narcissism. Now it's a cottage industry, mind you. Everyone and his
Right.
dog is in it. But there was a very long period, about 20 years, when there were no specialties. There were no like a lawyer specializing in narcissism or a therapist specializing in narcissism. And even in academia, it was pretty rare to find someone who was specializing in narcissism or even in cluster B personality disorder. It's a late phenomenon, very late.
Right. I mean, I would say that I've been practicing law for 24 years, almost 25 years, which is crazy to me. But I would say that most of the time people would say that oh, the husband is controlling or the wife is crazy. It was really only just the last few years that you would start to hear that everybody's a narcissist, this one's a narcissist, but they really didn't understand what that meant. And so I really started researching it and studying it because everybody was accusing people of being a narcissist. So I wanted to start winning in the courtroom. And so I started really diving deep into what it was and what narcissism is so that I could win in the courtroom. And then I also had a narcissistic business partner, and there's a lot of narcissism in my family. And so I wanted to really learn about it. But you were one of the ones that I started really researching because of how um, amazing your resources are. So it's great for me to. I was so happy when you connected with me on LinkedIn because I thought, oh my gosh, this is. I definitely want to talk to you.
Thank you. I'm more of an academic type. My recent work, when I started my work, I was more a victim advocate. But in the last 13 or 14 years, I'm 100% academic. So my lectures are not accessible. I wouldn't say they're accessible to the wider public. I mean, the language is very florid and very highly specific, and there's a lot of reliance on academic sources, studies, and so on and so forth. And I indeed cater to the needs of clinicians and therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists and social workers and judges. And I cater to a niche of people who are supposedly professionals. and they need reliable information. And a lot of the information online is anything but reliable.
Which is why I like it. Uh, Um, so, one of the articles that really jumped out at me, and just for the people who are listening, Professor Sam Vaknin is the author of many, many resources, but one of the books is Malignant Self-Love, Narcissism Revisited, as well as many other books and ebooks on the topic of psychology. He actually says that he is a diagnosed narcissist. He has had a number of different uh, resources that he talks about, but he deeply understands this topic. And one of the articles that really jumped out at me was what a narcissist really thinks of you. And I just thought this was so fascinating because I think that this really is uh, so interesting to me how they see you and that you really shed light on what you call the four S's and how a narcissist is formed and that they come from it comes really more from the mother and how you see them as weak and because I always say the narcissist is more afraid of you than you are of them, and how a narcissist is formed, and the whole thing. And so I really want to start there. But then I have so many other things that I want to talk to you about. But I really want to start there, and kind of how a narcissist sees the other person. So if you could start with that, I would love for you to kind of
Well,
shed some.
that one is a short one. The short answer, he doesn't. Simply. The narcissist is incapable of perceiving other people as separate to him and as external. What narcissists do, they convert other people, especially people who might be significant. I call these people insignificant others.
Mm,
They convert other people who might contribute somehow. They could contribute narcissistic supply or sex or services or safety or whatever. When a narcissist has reached a conclusion that you can do something for him or for her, half of all narcissists today are women, by the way, which is a major development.
hmm
Less than 20% of narcissists in the 1970s were women,
mm,
and now half of them are women.
mm,
Anyhow, when a narcissist comes across someone he thinks might be of use, in whatever way, what the narcissist does, he converts that person into an internal object. There is a representation, a snapshot, an avatar um, inside the narcissist's mind that represents you. From that moment on, the narcissist continues to interact with that representation, with that snapshot, not with you. He is incapable of perceiving you as external, separate, autonomous, agentic, independent, with your own wishes and hopes and dreams and plans and decisions and emotions and cognitions. All these are threats. Any hint of autonomy and independence is a threat. So the narcissist absolutely is compelled, it's a compulsion, is compelled to convert you into a figment of his imagination, an element in it, within his own internal landscape.
mm,
That way, in his mind, in his delusional, distorted mind, he had acquired, he has acquired control over you. Now that you're an internalized object, he controls you 100%. He is unlikely to be surprised by you. You are unlikely to betray him or abandon him, and so on and so forth, because you're inside his mind. You're a captive, you're hostage. So you're an extension of the narcissist, a tool, an instrument. You're objectified totally, and so on. He doesn't see you. That's precisely the issue. What the narcissist does, he converts you initially within a process known as the shared fantasy. It's not my discovery. It's someone by the name of Sander in 1989. Within the process of the shared fantasy, the narcissist first converts you into a maternal figure. By the way, this has nothing to do with your genitalia. The narcissist converts everyone into a maternal figure. His best friends, her husband, everyone becomes a maternal figure. And then, in order for you to qualify as a maternal figure, you have to prove to the narcissist that you are a good surrogate mother substitute. You have to love the narcissist unconditionally. He tests you. He abuses you in order to test you. Will you still love me despite everything? And then he expects you to provide him with 2 out of the 4 S's. The 4 S's are sex, services, supply, sadistic or narcissistic, and safety, your mere presence. If you provide him with 2 out of the 4, you qualify to become a new mother. And then you become a mother. He never sees you. He never ever sees you. He idealizes you at the beginning. Then you become a mother. Then you become a service provider. Then you become a body to masturbate with. I mean, he never sees you. You're a possession. You're an object, indistinguishable from let's say, a refrigerator or a smartphone. And he's equally attached to you as he is to his smartphone. Actually, I've just misled you. He's much more attached to his smartphone than to you. So there's no process called cathexis. There's no emotional investment. Everything happens in the narcissist's mind. There's a theater production going on inside the narcissist's head, in his mind. And you are a prop, like a theater prop. You just happen to be there. So it was a bit of a long answer because people can't wrap their minds around this. They can't accept this. They say, oh, I've been chosen because I'm special. I'm kind, I'm generous, I'm empathic. That's why the narcissist chose me. The narcissist wouldn't recognize empathy and kindness if they fell on his head. And he couldn't care less who you are. He couldn't care less who you are. You are fungible. You're replaceable. You're interchangeable. The proof of this is in the pudding when the narcissist dumps you the next day with someone else.
Americans spend up to 90% of their time indoors and take 20,000 breaths a day. Yet, according to the EPA, indoor air is actually more polluted than outdoor air. And in fact, 100 times more polluted than outdoor air. In fact, it's responsible for up to 7 million premature deaths annually. And I know for us, we have had issues with asthma. My daughter has struggled with asthma. And that's why we're so excited to find Air Doctor. Air Doctor has captured the attention of huge media outlets such as CNN, Money, ABC, and more. And it filters out 99.9% of dangerous contaminants and allergens such as pollen, pet dander, dust mites, and mold, and even bacteria and viruses. So your lungs don't have to do all of that extra work. So right now, Air Doctor also comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you don't love it, you just send it back for a refund minus shipping. So head to airdoctorpro.com and use the promo code Your Best Life, and depending on the model, you receive up to 39% off and up to $300 off. Exclusive to podcast customers, you'll also receive a 3-year warranty on any unit, which is an additional $84 value. Lock in this special offer by going to AIRDOCTORPRO.com and use the promo code Your Best Life.
The alacrity is breathtaking. So you're nothing. You're simple. I don't know what else to say. It's so the narcissist doesn't see you. Even the language betrays us. Even the language betrays us because we keep saying the narcissist sees you as, whereas the narcissist never sees you.
I mean, it's frightening, but they do this push-pull thing because as soon as you start to try to leave, right, and you start to say, that's it, I'm done, because you get all the way to the edge. And then they do try to pull you back in because they don't want to see those S's leave. So they do know what to say. And I always say everything they do is a manipulation. Everything they do is a manipulation. And they're very, very good at knowing how to mirror you, how to say exactly what they need to say to pull you back in to their fold. Right?
Yeah. In both narcissism and in borderline personality organization, for example, borderline personality disorder, we have something called approach avoidance repetition compulsion. The narcissist and the borderline more so than the narcissist. And many, many narcissists are actually borderline as well as narcissists. This is a very common comorbidity. So narcissists approach you, and they have to be the ones who discard you and dump you. They have to be the ones who devalue you. They have to be the ones who break up with you and end the relationship. They must be the ones because they're embedded in something called the shared fantasy. And the shared fantasy is a highly choreographed reenactment of the narcissist's relationship with his mother. The narcissist needs to get rid of you in order to resolve early childhood conflicts with his mother. If you are the one who is doing the discarding, if you are the one who is initiating the breakup, you are actually undermining the integrity and the longevity of the shared fantasy. And the narcissist has to lure you back in order to finish the movie the way it should be finished, in order to go through the motions and the almost automatic rituals that are involved in the shared fantasy. You have to be there, as I said, safety, presence. Your presence is crucial. Your presence is you're a prop, but it's crucial. So the narcissist cannot allow you to walk away. And if you do, he engages in something called hoovering. He tries to hoover you. Another comment I would like to make about what you said that narcissists are Machiavellian. In other words, they're manipulative. Yes, but they're Machiavellian and manipulative, unlike the psychopath. The psychopath is goal-oriented. The psychopath would manipulate you in order to obtain goals. The narcissist truly believes his own nonsense. He truly believes his promises. He is immersed in the shared fantasy. He's delusional. Many, many scholars, myself included, believe that narcissists are psychotic, in effect. They can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality. They have what we call impaired reality testing. So when the narcissist embarks on a shared fantasy with you, he believes his own fiction, his own stories, his own promises, and his own rendition of reality, something known as paracosm. So yes, the narcissist is highly manipulative within the shared fantasy, but he is in it with you. He is as committed to the shared fantasy, as credulous, as naive as you are, actually. And when he lures you in, he is luring himself back in as well. It's a joint enterprise. That is not the case with the psychopath. The psychopath never loses sight of reality. The psychopath knows very well when he's lying to you, when he's manipulating you, when he's deceiving you. The psychopath is after your money, your sex, your something. The psychopath is after something. The narcissist needs narcissistic supply, and he needs a good mother within a shared fantasy. End of story, basically. And so we tend to confuse narcissism with psychopathy and narcissism with borderline. And there's a good reason for that: comorbidity. In other words, many, many people are diagnosed with all three: borderline, psychopathy, and narcissism. There's actually a variant of narcissism known as malignant narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
Malignant narcissism is a confluence, a delectable confluence of narcissism, psychopathy, and sadism.
Yeah. But here's the thing. The way I've kind of separated narcissistic supply for people when they go to negotiate with a narcissist is I think that there's a hierarchy of narcissistic supply. And that is the way I've looked at it is I call it diamond level supply versus coal level supply. And those are my terms. And that is when you go to negotiate with a narcissist, I think that there's their image is what I call diamond level supply, reputation, how they look to the world, and that they will protect and defend that more than anything. And then what I call coal level supply is what I call like the dark underbelly of narcissistic supply. And that's like the control or the smearing of people or the, whatever they'll do to move goalposts in negotiations or holding on to people, or that, during the discard phase, what they will do to just keep the negotiations going just for the pure sadistic part of it, right? I mean, what I've seen in negotiations is actually that they will self-sabotage in order to keep somebody in that web of destruction, right?
Yeah, that's very true.
But the way that I tell people that they will get out of it is that they have to create leverage such that they have to threaten a source of supply that's more important for them to protect or defend than the supply that they get from manipulating that other person. And that source of supply is going to be tied to their image, because they will let go of what I call this coal level supply in order to protect this higher level source of supply, which is their image. Would you agree with that?
Well, in the 1990s, that's precisely what I said. I suggested that there are two types of narcissistic supply, primary and secondary, and that each of these two types has a three-level category. So you have high-grade supply, low-grade supply, and mid-grade supply.
Okay.
That's my original one. Yeah. So, and that primary supply is the most crucial to the narcissist. Secondary supply is a kind of maintenance supply. And that, of course, there are varying qualities of supply, and high-grade supply matters the most to the narcissist. It is true that the narcissist would sacrifice himself in order to hurt other people, but it's important to make a distinction between the narcissist in the throes, in the midst of a shared fantasy, and the narcissist having exited the shared fantasy. Once a narcissist is out of the shared fantasy, he becomes very psychopathic. Mm-hmm. He becomes antisocial. Mm-hmm. Because he's no longer emotionally invested in the shared fantasy. Mm-hmm. The other person is an enemy. We call it a persecutory object. Mm-hmm. That's an enemy, and then the narcissist becomes vindictive, sadistic, manipulative, indistinguishable from a primary psychopath, actually. Yes. But that is only outside the shared fantasy. As long as the narcissist is inside the shared fantasy with a willing, consenting partner, or even enthusiastic partner, then many of these manifestations are much reduced because the narcissist is very wary of losing the partner. He has severe abandonment anxiety, separation insecurity. So yeah. he's on his best behavior. Mm-hmm. But the minute the shared fantasy is over, he has discarded the partner, or God forbid, the partner has discarded him, then of course you're going to see the ugly face of narcissism.
Yeah. And they turn on a dime. They have like that splitting part of their personality. So it's black to white or white to black in immediate. You're either for me or against me. And if you're against me, then it's public enemy number one.
Splitting is an infantile, primitive defense mechanism, typical of 2 years old. And it is when the 2-year-old, between the ages of 18 months and 36 months, to be precise. During this period, the child divides the world into all good, all bad. For example, mommy is all good and I'm all bad, the child says. If the child is abused, traumatized, mistreated, the child has to make sense of this kind of misconduct by the parental misconduct. So what the child says, I deserve it. I have it coming. I'm worthy of punishment. I'm a bad boy. So that's an example of splitting. I'm all bad, mommy is all good. Later on, the world is all bad, I'm all good. The world is all good, I'm all bad. Right and wrong, black and white. It's black and white thinking. The clinical term is dichotomous thinking. So splitting is very common in borderline personality disorder and very common in narcissistic personality disorder. Yes,
Right.
it's black and white. And you are all white and you can do no wrong and you're perfect and you're amazing and you're hyper intelligent and you're drop dead gorgeous and you're unprecedented in the love bombing phase of the shared fantasy when the narcissist is going through the process of idealizing you as a new mother. And of course, you're the exact opposite in the devaluation and discard phase, where you can do no right and you're ugly. And actually, you're much more stupid than he thought, and so on and so forth. And how does he explain to himself that he has misjudged you so egregiously at the beginning of the shared fantasy? He says that you have changed. You have changed. You have changed owing to other people's bad influence on you, or you've been acting, you've deceived him, or something. The onus is on you. It's your fault that he has misjudged you at the very beginning as a perfect being. You
Right.
know?
Right. And then they have to make sure that they have to take you down before you can take them down. So
You're an enemy, too.
they have to go smear you. They have to go make sure that everybody knows, and then you become public enemy number one, and they use the court system and they use the children as pawns and whatever they means they can. And what I tell people is that their limbic system then actually takes over and it shuts down the neocortex part of the brain at that point, and they're no longer dealing with rational or reasonable. They're literally dealing with a 2-year-old in an adult body at that point.
The narcissist is always a 2-year-old in an adult body. I don't think a narcissist is ever rational, actually.
No,
Mm.
no. But what I think judges need to understand, mediators need to understand, people in the court system needs to understand is that, when you're sitting across from this person in a negotiation, they're not interested in let's come to a rational, reasonable conclusion. Let's save fees. Let's do what the right thing for the children or anything like that. They're looking at when I was still practicing law, obviously I do this full time now, but when I was still practicing law, I would have narcissists for clients, and they would say, I'd rather pay you than her. And I would be like, well, I'm sick of you too. I don't want that. I want to be done with this. But but that's really what they will do. And they will self-sabotage. They will self-sabotage. And that's the scary thing. That's the scary thing.
Yeah. They don't perceive it as self-sabotage. Their top priority is to restore their sense of grandiosity. Grandiosity is a cognitive distortion. It's a misperception of reality. It's an inflated, fantastic self-image and self-perception, which hides, camouflages, disguises a very brittle and fragile core or lack of core, absent core. So the narcissist values his grandiosity or her grandiosity more than anything else, more than anything else. And from the narcissist point of view, it's an absolutely rational behavior
Mhm.
because protecting, defending the grandiosity, restoring it, reinstating it, demonstrating it visibly, ostentatiously, one-upmanship, winning, winning, recasting the enemy as evil and decrepit and corrupt and in the eyes of the world, thereby elevating the narcissist morally. All these have to do with grandiosity. The minute the shared fantasy is over, the narcissist's grandiosity is damaged, is hurt. And there is a process known as narcissistic injury, and in rare cases, narcissistic mortification. The vast majority of divorces involve narcissistic mortification. Narcissistic mortification is an injury to the grandiose, inflated, fantastic self-image that is rendered public, that becomes known to a larger circle of people. So then it involves humiliation and shame. Narcissism is widely considered a defense against shame. The child is ashamed. The child is abused and traumatized and so on. There's a lot of shame there. And the narcissist is defending against this shame. And when the narcissist is dumped or discarded, or when the shared fantasy collapses or whatever, it's a failure. Of course, it's a defeat. The clinical term is collapse. And then the narcissist feels ashamed, humiliated, and he needs to restore his godlike, unblemished, perfect self-image, and he needs to convince other people of that because he is reliant on input from the environment. He doesn't do internal regulation. He regulates his internal world from the outside, that is narcissistic supply.
Making that transition between summer and fall is always a crazy thing. And that's why I love having a leather jacket, like my gorgeous one from Quince. And they have timeless and high quality items, which I love. And they don't blow my budget, which I also love. They have cashmere sweaters and washable silk tops. And everything is like 50 to 80% less than other brands, which I also love. They cut out the middleman. They pass the savings on to us, which is also amazing. It's safe and ethical, which I also love. I really love my brown leather jacket from them. It's super stylish and it's high quality. Just love that. So make switching seasons a breeze with Quince's high quality closet essentials. Go to quince.com/negotiate for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/negotiate to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/negotiate.
So it's not enough for the narcissist to say, I know that I'm the good person, and I know that my wife is the evil, horrible bee. That's not enough. He needs other people to tell him, you are right. You have convinced us. She is truly evil, and you are the victim. He needs this. That's why the smear campaigns, that's why the intransigence, that's why the apparent irrationality, self-sacrificial sometimes, because he can give up on money, he can give up on power, he can give up on sex, he can give up on his freedom. He will go to prison. But he can never ever give up on his grandiosity. Without his grandiosity, he is non-existent. There is no core. There's an absence there.
Yeah, so it's a fragile ego. But I do always say they are more afraid of you than you are of them. So the stronger that the other person becomes, the more afraid that they get. And so when they do create that leverage that threatens that, what I call diamond level supply, you're calling primary source of supply, which is their image.
No, I have high grade supply. It's the same like the diamond.
High grade supply, that's the key. That's the key.
Yes, but it's important to understand that they are not afraid of you for reasons that you would comprehend. They're not afraid of you because you could damage them, they're afraid of you because you can take away their grandiosity. You can humiliate them. You can shame them into having to face themselves in the mirror. They are exceedingly delusional. Again, to the point that many scholars, many prominent scholars like Kernberg, and less prominent scholars like Vaknin, think that narcissism is actually a form of psychosis. It's so delusional, so sick. So if you were to expose the narcissist's confabulations, prevarications, fantasies, self-invented biography, if you were to expose expose the narcissist, reveal who he truly is, the Wizard of Oz, essentially,
Yeah.
behind the curtain.
Yeah.
The narcissist is defending the curtain. It's the curtain that the narcissist is defending.
Exactly what I always say.
And
Exactly.
he's terrified that you will pull away the curtain. He's not terrified that you will take away his money or you will put him in prison. Or, yes, of course, that's unpleasant. But his terror is that it will become known who he truly is. Not a giant, not a giant, but a
Thank you.
midget.
That is what I say all the time. It's exactly, and it's the only way that you will be able to get them to to cut that source of supply from you. The only way.
Yeah. If you, legally, of course,
Yes.
are capable of exposing the narcissist for what he is and who he is, there's no greater threat as far as he's concerned. He would do anything. He would compromise. He would give you everything. He would, just to prevent this from happening. He would become
Correct.
initially aggressive. Initially, would become aggressive and vindictive and maybe even violent and so on. But when he sees that it's not working, he will suddenly, he's a bully. It's a bully.
He's a bully. And
The
when
best
you
thing you can do
figure
with a
out
bully is terrify.
100%. And whenever I'm helping people in these negotiations and they say, I'm still not out of it, I always say, you haven't figured out a way to threaten that source of diamond level supply yet, because when you figure that out, he or she will be done. You'll be done.
How do we cope with bullies? It's a very bad idea to communicate with a bully, to compromise with a bully, to negotiate with a bully. Extremely bad idea. The only way is power, force. There's no other way.
The only way. And I tell people, I know it feels uncomfortable because I don't want to fight. I don't want to do this. I want to be done with this peacefully or whatever. I just want what's fair. You want what's fair. You're dealing with a narcissist. This is the only way.
And I must say that, however unpalatable it is, I must say that many people, being exposed to the narcissist could be addictive because narcissism brings to the scene a lot of drama, a lot of excitement, a lot of color. It's a lively life. It's a kind of, in a state of excitation and arousal on a constant basis. It's difficult. It's difficult after you've been with a narcissist. Some people find potential dates and so on boring. So it's difficult to let go of it's. I mean, even when you discard the narcissist and break up with the narcissist, it's difficult to let go of the narcissist. Clinically, there are two processes involved in training and introjection. I'm not going into it right now. The narcissist is inside your head, still catering to many of your psychological needs long after he's out of your life physically. So I think many people are trying to find excuses to stay in touch with the narcissist. Even litigation is a way of staying in touch.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the famous excuses. I want my child to have a father, for example. Yeah, that's why the narcissist is in my life, because I want my child to have a father. Or, sometimes I can see the inner child in him, and this child is in need of love. Or people come up with the most amazing concoctions just to allow them, however indirectly, to stay in touch with the narcissist. Because there is an element of addiction in all this.
Definitely. Definitely. Well, I mean, I think it's, that dopamine cortisol back and forth, right? Because they get that dopamine hit when they're love bombing, and then there's that cortisol because of the stress hormone. That's what's going on in the victim as well. And I think that's what causes the trauma bond. But I think that there's also, to me, they look for vulnerabilities in people, right? And they know that there's that opening because, you mentioned the Wizard of Oz. I think the Wizard of Oz is all around such a perfect analogy for everything narcissism, right? Because I think that the narcissist is that wizard behind the curtain and really just that weak little fragile ego behind the curtain. I also think that they look for people who are easy victims, right? You know, not to say that, you know, I think that people who are empaths and who end up in these relationships are usually good people, people of high value. But I also think if you think of Glinda the Good Witch, right, who was like, knew who she was, who's very stood in her power. She was obviously, remember at the beginning of the movie where the Wicked Witch came near her and she flicked her away and she was like, go away, you have no power here. Remember that? And the Wicked Witch was like, oh my God, I'm not going near her. She was like, please, please, lady. And I think that that's a very good analogy for narcissists, because narcissists do not go near people who know who they are, and they don't prey upon that, right? I think they look for people who are going to be good sources of supply.
This is where I would beg to differ. First of all, empath is not a clinical term. I regard it as a self-aggrandizing term.
Okay.
I regard it as a form of narcissism.
Okay.
I fully believe that many of the people self-identifying as empath are actually covert narcissists.
Okay.
Um, so we'll put it aside. It definitely has no place in an academic discourse. Yes. But let's say empathic people. By now we have a substantial body of studies on victims of narcissistic abuse and so on. We fail to find this. We have not found any common denominator. There were strong women. Most of the victims are women. That's still a fact. There were strong women and weaker women. There were broken women and fully integrated women. There were educated women and less educated women. There were rich victims and poor victims. We found, despite well over 25 years of efforts, we failed to find a single common denominator. Definitely, when it comes to a personality organization, in other words, more empathic, less empathic, more kind, more dark, more narcissists seem to have, they're promiscuous in the sense that they seem to have no preference. Availability is a major factor. That's the only factor that we did find in dozens of studies. If the person is available to participate, then the narcissist is all over that person. Now, it's probably true that a person would be available to participate in the narcissist shared fantasy because she is vulnerable or he is vulnerable at that point in time. So that person may have undergone a life crisis, maybe a divorce, something, and the narcissist is the answer. So there could be transient vulnerabilities that are the outcomes of circumstances, and life crises. However, there is no type. I insist on this. All the academic studies and my experience, there is no type. It is not true that the narcissists prefer weaker people, more empathic people, more kind people, more generous people. I regard all this as a form of self-aggrandizement by the victims. The victims want to believe that they're special, they're nice, they're empathic, they're kind, they're generous, when actually they are a crosscut of the general population. Some of them are nice, some of them are very not nice. Some of them are empathic, some of them are totally disempathic, some of them are psychopaths. Many of them are narcissists. I don't think that there is, regrettably, online organized competitive victim, which I find to be very destructive to real victims. And this competitive victimhood is, as I said, self-inflating and self-aggrandizing. It is entitled. It is very reminiscent of narcissism. It is splitting. These people split. The narcissist is all bad, is demonic, and I'm angelic. I'm impeccable and blameless and blemishless. You could see all the hallmarks of narcissism among these self-proclaimed victims. And I'm very, very, very much against this phenomenon. It is not grounded in reality, of the reality that we could find in psychology. And it is definitely strongly indicative of narcissistic traits or narcissistic personality style, if not full-fledged disorder, in many, many of these victims, so-called victims. So I'm not denying, how can I deny? I was the first to describe narcissistic abuse. Let's not forget that I'm the father of this. So I'm not denying that they're real victims. I'm just denying the assumption that the real victims are online and that the victims we see online, the self-proclaimed victims that we see online, are the real victims. I'm denying that completely.
I mean, I've certainly seen a lot of victims that are men, though, as well.
Men as well, of course.
I mean, I've also, and you've written a lot as well on how leaders can attract movements of of people into their and victim and attract victims that way, right? Who are narcissists. I mean, and so and there's CEOs who can attract victims through who are narcissists. I mean, I think people who are particularly charismatic, or I don't know if it's the leaders themselves or if it's the people who are susceptible, but they attract masses of people. And I know that you've written about that recently. I'm trying to be delicate about this because I try not to get into politics, but I know that you've touched on this recently. And I wanted to just see what your thoughts are on that. You know, how do these leaders, whether they're CEOs, whether they're politicians, attract masses of people?
Whereas it's incorrect to say that there is a type that the narcissist is attracted to, or that is attracted to the narcissist. That is incorrect. It is very correct to say that narcissists gravitate to highly specific professions. So, for example, we find 5 times more psychopaths among chief executive officers of Fortune 500 companies, 5 times more than the general population.
Wow.
It is wow. It's amazing. We find a preponderance of narcissists in specific professions. There have been studies, for example, of rock stars and media figures, show business figures, and so on and so forth. We find a high representation of narcissists. Of course, we all know that psychopaths and narcissists are overrepresented in the prison population. That is the work of Robert Hare and Babiak and others. So it is true to say that there are enclaves and professions where narcissists are overrepresented. You know, when the narcissist, why do narcissists gravitate there? Because they can obtain supply. It's all about supply.
Of course.
A narcissist is charismatic because the narcissist says, as a political leader, because the narcissist says basically three things. Number one, you do not need to think, you do not need to take responsibility, you do not need to be accountable, you do not need to do anything. I'll do everything for you. That's a great relief, isn't it? Jean-Paul Sartre, the father of existentialism, suggested that it is the need to choose, the need to decide that creates anxiety. And so when someone takes this away from you and tells you, you don't need to decide anymore, I'll make all the decisions for you, it's a huge relief. Number two, the charismatic leader tells you, you're perfect. He idealizes you. He tells you you're wonderful. You have no flaws. You deserve me because I'm perfect.
What if you could just take a shot and lose all the weight you wanted to. I know for me, a few years ago, I was dealing with thyroid issues, menopause issues, autoimmune issues, all the things, and I gained a bunch of weight and I lost it all, but it took forever. And I wish that something like Body had been around back then to help me lose the weight. But now you get the benefit of it because Body is now around to help you lose weight. It's just one shot a week. And combined with a healthy lifestyle, you can lose 15 to 20% of your weight in a year on average and actually keep it off. They've helped more than 200,000 people so far, and they help you even with support, with getting the medication through your insurance and everything that you need so that you can actually lose the weight. That means that it's such a great opportunity for you now. So average weight loss is 15 to 20% in a year with a healthy lifestyle change, and BMI and other eligibility criteria apply. Go to ro.co/Rebecca. Sign up today and you'll pay just $99 a month for your first month and $145 a month after that. And medication costs are separate. That's ro.co/Rebecca.
I'm perfect, and since I chose you as my follower, that means you're perfect. This is a process known as co-idealization. When the narcissist idealizes you, what is he saying? He's saying, you're perfect, you're amazing, you're this and that makes me perfect because I own you. You're mine. So that means I'm perfect. So this is co-idealization. So this is the second element. And the third element, the political leader creates a shared fantasy. He says, the future is going to be much better than the present. If you follow me, the future will be amazing, fascinating. So these are the three irresistible offerings, you know? Just follow me. You don't need to make any decisions. You're perfect. You're flawless. And I'm leading you into an amazing, incredible future. Whereas your present sucks. These are the messages. In a way, this is what the narcissist does with his spouse, with his children, in the shared fantasy known as the narcissist family. It's a cult. This is a cult mentality. He creates a cult.
Yeah, of course. But they're constantly gaslighting them, and they say things that are they're constantly lying and saying one thing and doing others, right?
Actually, studies show that narcissists do not gaslight and do not lie. What they do, however, they mislead you. That part is true. They mislead you greatly by making promises that they never keep, by introducing you into a fantasy and taking you away from reality. They mislead you horribly, but they believe their own confabulations. They believe their own stories and they believe their own promises. Psychopaths lie and gaslight. Gaslighting is premeditated, is intentional. And the person who gaslights maintains reality testing. In other words, the person who gaslights you knows that he's gaslighting you. He knows that this is a fantasy, a story, a piece of fiction. The narcissist doesn't. He's really into it. He believes his own story, his own piece of fiction, his own theater production.
So they believe
because he believes in
it's like it's not a lie if you believe it.
it is misleading. If you believe that what you're saying is true, then yes, it's not a lie, of course.
Right.
It doesn't sit with the definition of a lie.
But they don't ever keep those promises.
They don't keep their promises because of the dynamic of the shared fantasy. But when they make the promise, they 100% believe they're gonna keep it. They do not future think. People confuse narcissists with psychopaths. Narcissists are delusional. They're mentally ill, seriously mentally ill. Like you would not blame a psychotic person for saying, here's a giraffe standing in the living room. And he fully believes there's a giraffe standing in the living room. You won't say he's lying. He's lying. There's no giraffe there. He's mentally ill.
But that's why they don't want to be held accountable.
So accountability is a different issue. You're a lawyer, you know it better than I do. But the narcissist, when he makes an utterance, when he makes a statement, fully believes in it. Fully believes in it. Whereas a psychopath knows he's lying. He knows he's gaslighting. And of course, there are many narcissists who are psychopaths, which creates this confusion. But it's important to reconceive of the narcissist as someone who is not in control of his mind. He is as sick as a psychotic. Psychotic has hallucinations. A psychotic hears voices. A psychotic believes crazy things. Same with a narcissist. If a narcissist tells you, we're going to get married, we're going to have 3 children, and we're going to live happily ever after, when he tells you this, when he's telling you this, he believes it 100%. He's committed to it 100%.
Right.
It never happens.
And this is why a person who is getting out of this relationship, I tell them constantly, they need to put this invisible shield down around themselves and start looking at this person as if they are observing them. Observe, don't absorb, respond, don't react, and just start saying, you need to look at this person as if they're a toddler having a tantrum on the floor, distance yourself from this person, because
Very true.
they are mentally ill, basically.
They're mentally ill. That's the issue.
As if they have autism or whatever, right?
Yeah. The best example is a psychotic, because a psychotic also comes up with an alternate reality. And the psychotic is convinced of that reality. He tells you, what are you talking about? There is a giraffe in the living room. Can't you see it? And the giraffe is talking to me. Can't you hear it?
Mm-hmm.
And the psychotic gets really pissed off if you say no. He thinks you're manipulating him. It's the same with the narcissist. Today we are reconceiving of narcissism in 3 ways. Number one, it's a post-traumatic condition. So it's a CPTSD reaction. Number two, the narcissist is a toddler. A toddler. That's why therapy fails with the narcissist, because therapy is for adults, not for toddlers. We need to use child psychology. And number three, narcissists are really, really, really mentally ill. The great Otto Kernberg thought and suggested that narcissism is a form of schizophrenia, that it is as bad as schizophrenia, which is the worst mental illness we know of. I agree. Narcissism is as bad as schizophrenia. It's horrible. A narcissist is no longer with us. He's not in reality. Now, the thing is that narcissists have learned to simulate people, simulate adults. So they appear to be adults. They are good at their jobs. They are eloquent. They are knowledgeable. And this simulation works wonders. And then we get pissed off at them. We get angry. And you're right. I'm not contesting that they mislead you all the time. 100% of the time. It's just not premeditated. That's the difference. And they don't know the difference between reality and the bullshit they're selling you. They don't.
So you have to take a strategic approach. You have to distance yourself. You have to get out of this relationship and start taking steps to start documenting, start doing what you need to do to expose them so that you can and get out of the relationship and not expect that they will ever be able to be rehabilitated.
Fully agree. I never tried to imply during this conversation that narcissists are not dangerous. They're exceedingly dangerous. I never tried to say that their impact on you is benign. It's not benign. It's malignant. I'm just saying, if you want to cope with a narcissist efficaciously, you need to understand that you're dealing with a mentally ill person who has severe difficulty to tell apart reality and fantasy, and is very protective of his fantasy, of his godlike fantasy. And you need to have this key to the narcissist's mind. When you're dealing with a psychopath, the psychopath is rational. Psychopath is goal-oriented. you know?
Mm-hmm.
He can negotiate. He
Mm-hmm.
often compromises. He
Mm-hmm.
makes deals. He's a
Mm-hmm.
deal maker, you know? Psychopaths. They are coercive. They're violent. They're aggressive. They're unpleasant. They're defiant. They're reckless. I agree. But at least they are understandable. They're comprehensible. The narcissist lives in his own world, on his own planet. It's like the little prince, you know. And you need, if you want to survive the narcissist, you need to visit his planet. Pretending that the narcissist is merely a malevolent adult will not get you very far because he's not an adult and he's not malevolent. He's just a bad influence. He's destructive. But it's not malice like the psychopath. Psychopath is malicious. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, as I keep saying, and I said here, many narcissists are also psychopaths. It's not that I'm saying that the
Mm-hmm.
two are totally, many narcissists are also psychopaths
Right. Or borderline.
or borderlines. About 40% of narcissists are comorbid. So they are borderline and psycho. And by the way, borderline today, we are reconceiving of borderline personality disorder
Right. Or
as
bipolar.
somewhat
Or
as
bipolar.
somewhat psychopathic.
Right. Or I've seen bipolar as well.
Well, bipolar is wrong. Bipolar is a mood disorder. It's nothing to do with borderline. But
Mm-hmm.
borderline personality disorder, today we know when the borderline is exposed to stress, to anxiety, to tension, to abandonment, real or imagined, the borderline becomes psychopathic, secondary psychopath. She becomes highly psychopathic.
Mm-hmm.
So whichever way you look, you end up with an antisocial creature, somewhat psychopathic.
Right. So, one of the things that I think is that they very often, and I see this played out in history as well, I certainly see it in negotiations. And I think even based on some of the writings that you've talked about recently, you've talked about some of these leaders and you've mentioned some of the recent leaders in history. I think if you look at Napoleon, you look at Hitler, I think that narcissists end up overplaying their hand. They end up self-destructing because they make critical mistakes that end up leading to their downfall, and they end up overplaying their hand, and they end up causing their own destruction because of overplaying their hand. What do you think about that?
Fully agree. Here, there's no debate between us. But it goes to show that they don't perceive reality correctly. It's exactly proof of what I've been saying. Because a narcissist misperceives reality and himself in reality, he's grandiose about himself and he lives in fantasy. He makes mistakes. He overplays his hand, he underestimates the enemy, he misreads emotional cues, sexual cues, social cues, exactly like people with autism. The narcissist is very bad with social behavior. Narcissists have something that I dubbed cold empathy. It's a combination of cognitive and reflexive empathy. So they can scan you for vulnerabilities when they're negotiating with you or anything. They can scan you for vulnerabilities and leverage this to some extent. But their inflated, fantastic self-perception is such, they're so godlike, they're so all-powerful, omnipotent, omniscient, they know everything, can teach them nothing, they can learn nothing, that ultimately they're so stupid.
Mm-hmm.
If I have to use one word, narcissists are dumb,
Mm-hmm.
seriously dumb. They may be knowledgeable, they may be intelligent. For example, look at me, but they're dumb. I always say about myself, by the way, that I'm probably the dumbest person I ever met. I am super knowledgeable. I'm intelligent, but I'm dumb. Why am I dumb? Because I don't gauge reality properly, because I don't learn, because I don't evolve, because I don't evaluate people, appraise them correctly, because I misbehave as if there were no consequences to my actions. These are great definitions of being dumb, you know? And narcissists are dumb, simply, because they are enmeshed, immersed in fantasy, and they refuse to have anything to do with reality, because reality flies in the face of their grandiosity. Reality challenges and undermines the thing that is most precious to the narcissist, his self-perception and self-image as perfect, a perfect entity, divine.
Yeah, I mean, and I've seen them lie even when they don't have to lie about things that they don't even need to lie about. I mean, it doesn't even make any sense.
It's part of the fantasy.
Hmm.
The fantasy is largely superfluous. The irony is, between you and me, a narcissist could find a partner, for example, an intimate partner, without the fantasy. There's no need for the fantasy. It's utterly unnecessary.
Mm.
Many of the things a narcissist does, many of them are unnecessary, and they are responsive or reactive to internal dynamics. They have nothing to do with the outside, with other people, with reality, with circumstances, with the environment, with demands or expectations. He's not responsive to the world. He's responsive to what's happening inside him. So many of the things he does, many of the choices, many of the decisions, many of the statements he makes, many of them appear to be totally superfluous and self-destructive and self-defeating.
Hmm.
None of this is needed. Many narcissists are good looking, they are, you know, wealthy, they are even famous, or they are knowledgeable and intelligent, captivating, lively. They don't need the fantasy.
Right.
And yet they would impose the fantasy on you, mislead you, hurt you, break your heart, you know, because they can't help it. And this is what we call in psychology compulsion. Narcissists are compulsive.
Hmm.
They can't help it. You can't help compulsion. I mean, you can treat it, but you can't help it. It's beyond your control. They're out of control. The irony, narcissists are all about control. They want to control you. They want to control the kids. They want to control the workplace. They're control freaks. They're
Hmm.
hysterical about control.
Hmm.
The reason is they're out of control.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's no self-control there.
So if you would give anybody one last piece of advice, what would you say?
Your gut knows best. It's been documented since 1970, 70. It's been documented that we have a reaction to narcissists, which is immediate. This reaction is known as uncanny valley reaction. When we come across narcissists and psychopaths, there's a tiny voice inside us that says something's wrong, something's awry, something's off key. It's too good, it's crazy, it's something. You have a gut instinct, you have an intuition that tells you uh, this person you're faced with is not well put together, is half baked, not full fledged human. Some modules are missing, like empathy, like positive emotions, like treating other people nicely, kindness. Some modules are missing. And this is within the first few seconds. Uncanny Valley has been documented
Mm.
in various studies in Japan, started in Japan, has been documented within less than 7 seconds, fewer than 7 seconds. So trust your instinct, trust your intuition, listen to yourself, shut out the world, ignore him or her, listen to yourself. What the voice here is telling you. And if you have the slightest doubt, disengage. Don't let your loneliness and neediness dictate your mate selection or choices. Just disengage and walk away. It's much cheaper that way in the long run.
Hmm. I think very good advice. Very good advice. This has been such an amazing conversation, so helpful and so insightful, so
Thank
brilliant.
you.
So
I hope you don't mind that we disagreed on some things.
oh
That
no,
is the
no, I
essence,
love that.
the essence of a good dialogue.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love that.
And
Love.
here's one thing: academe changes all the time, and it
Hmm.
changes by absorbing input from people in the field.
Hmm.
I may say completely different things 10 years from now. I may be saying completely different things. There will be new studies, new discoveries, and so on. Right now, this is the state of the art. But the state of the art changes month by month.
I think it's really, really fascinating, and I love reading your work and listening to what you have to say. So, thank you for having this conversation with me.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank
Take
you.
care.